What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the God Dog It podcast. Just a couple things real quick. I know this is a new podcast, and so I've changed the name. I decided to not go with Don't Polies. I don't know, it just sounds kind of tacky. I was trying to find something clever, but it's a new podcast, so still working out the kinks. And then ultimately, I do want to make it a podcast where it is an audio file versus a video file, but I'm having some issues figuring out how to get that taken care of. And here come my dogs. They're supposed to sit downstairs, but that's okay. So today we're going to be talking about a brief history of not dog breeds, but classes of dog breeds and how they fit into the bigger picture of what we recognize as dogs. Now, modern dogs, modern wolves are not very closely related to modern dogs. So it's theorized that about 14,000 to 15,000 years ago, that's the first time that we for sure see canine skeletons with human skeletons in ancient burial sites. And it's theorized that there was an isolated and distinct wolf population that eventually went extinct, but did live on as the modern dog. And despite being extinct in the wild, has done incredibly well for itself, being versatile to humans. And there's a quote that says, there's nothing more advantageous to a species than being useful to humans. And nobody really knows for sure where the first canines became domesticated, but all three of the major theories point to somewhere in Eurasia. Usually it's Western Europe, Eastern Europe, or Western Asia. Now, as far as wolves and dogs go, I'm not a biologist or anything, I don't have a degree, but I did go to school for it a little bit, and I've thought a lot about it. And, excuse me, can you go lay down? Please, go. They don't like to listen. But I consider wolves and dogs to be the same species, just different. To me, a species is any number of organisms that can reproduce with one another and easily produce viable offspring. So lions and tigers, they can breed together, but the offspring are almost always infertile. Same with horses and donkeys. So mules and ligers, since they're not fertile, would mean that horses and donkeys are not the same species and that tigers and lions are not the same species. However, you can hybridize virtually any dog breed to a wolf or to a coyote to a wolf, and all three of these will produce viable offspring. So for me, that's an indication that all three are the same species, but just very distinct broad categories within the same species. And so I propose a separate classification system below species. So we'd have species, and then ideally there would be breed, but as wolves, coyotes, and dogs are so distinct from one another, that would imply that we'd need something between breed and species. So I don't know what to propose for that, but I do know that I want dogs and wolves considered the same species, and that's relevant for the rest of this discussion. And it's just just me spreading my opinions out there. So new research shows that modern dogs compared to modern wolves and, in theory, ancient wolves have developed a lot of mutations similar, or at least equivalent, to humans as far as being sociable. Dogs appear to be slightly less intelligent on average than their wild counterparts, but that kind of comes with the territory of becoming highly specialized for a specific job. So your herding dogs tend to be your most intelligent, but if it comes to hunting or if it comes to problem solving, they're still not necessarily going to be that intelligent in that regard because they can rely on humans to do that, whereas a wild wolf is going to have to figure out all that stuff on its own, or its pack is going to have to help it. I watched a video once, I don't remember, I think it was National Geographic, but they were talking about the evolution of dogs. And they conducted a study where they put two dogs next to one another. And, well, one was a wolf and one was a dog, and they tested them in the same situation. They gave each one a puzzle. I believe it was a cage with food inside the cage, and they kept the canine outside the cage. And the dog would try a little bit, and then it would sit down and expect the human to help it. The wolf, however, would grow frustrated and keep trying to get into the cage, and it tried multiple different approaches. So from wolves, we move over into the primitive breeds. And first, I want to talk about land races because we're going to be using that here in a few minutes. And what a land race is basically any living thing, could be plant or an animal, that has evolved to work with humans, but still has a major component of natural selection in its population. So some herding dogs are really good examples where essentially the person who owns the farm, or excuse me, livestock guardian dogs, not herding dogs, and these livestock guardian dogs are left to breed on their own, and they just kind of protect the livestock as they go, and sometimes they get killed, and that's how natural selection determines the outcome of the breed. There's very little artificial selection in that process. And then we have, so land races, we can find land races in most of these categories that I'm going to be going through, especially your livestock guardian dogs and a lot of your primitive dogs as well. Primitive dogs, also we have the pariah type dogs, and these are very similar to land races, but with one distinct difference, and that is that they rely on human waste. So the Thai Ridgeback, for example, is a very strong example of a pariah type dog. It was actually the very first example of a pariah type dog that I came across. Mongrels and strays, they also can often be, but are not always, pariah type dogs. So your pariah type dogs are, they're basically just eating garbage and stuff like that. They're doing a lot of what raccoons do, and pariah is not a term specific to canines. Raccoons in a lot of places can be considered pariah type animals. The pigeons and rats are also pariah type animals depending on the environment you go to, like New York, for example. I would definitely say that they'd be considered pariah types there. And then with our primitive dogs, we also have mongrels. Now, this is a little contestable, as not all mongrels are going to be descended from primitive stock. However, tying into the landrace type thing, mongrels are they're just the descendants of stray dogs, and so the breed distinctions, say between a Labrador and a Rottweiler, or certain types of Mastiff, whatever ends up becoming stray just breeds with whatever else is stray in that area. And natural selection becomes the primary guiding force for these breeds, and so we see what can be considered a de-evolution from the specialized characteristics of those founding breeds back into something that's more intelligent and more generalized. So it's evolving more towards what you'd expect a wolf to look like and behave like. And that's very important. My script is, there we go. It's not really a script, I'm just reading bullet points. And another thing, last week I was talking real quiet. I don't know, I follow this other podcast, the American Military History Podcast. He's got a very calm, soothing voice, but I would prefer more excitement. I wasn't feeling the calmness last week. So back to our primitive breeds. We also have the dingoes, is another separate group of primitive breeds, and these are basically an extreme version of mongrels. They're a species of canine, or a breed of canine that is, and really it's its own, like we've got our categories like primitive and hounds and stuff like that, and dingoes are almost a category within the category because it's a variety of breeds native that are now considered indigenous to Oceania. So your dingoes in Australia, your New Guinea singing dogs, and a lot of places in between these islands and stuff like that, where formerly domestic dogs have re-evolved to become wild. And on that point too, just a quick definition. Feral is essentially, it was domesticated and is no longer domesticated within that lifespan. So if it's a mongrel, it's descended from feral dogs, but is not itself feral. So moving on from that, we have our hounds, which are some of our least deviated breeds of dogs. And the term hound comes from Old English, where originally the most used dogs were hounds, and so the generic term for hounds was, or for dogs, was hounds. And then you had all your other types of dogs, which were called dogs, and that's where the mastiffs and everything else came in. But then hound as a term kind of starts getting pushed back. Dog starts throwing a fit downstairs. That's okay though, because someone's in heat and they have to be isolated, so they can be happy or not. I don't care. So within our hounds, we have our scent hounds and our sight hounds. The scent hounds are, now hounds in general, as a modern term, are dogs used for hunting. Now, not all hunting dogs are hounds. So now it's more of an ancestral term than we were originally using it for. So our scent hounds have evolved specifically to specialize in tracking and hunting based on scent. And then our sight hounds have likewise evolved for using their sight. Scent hounds are usually your tracking breeds, your beagles, stuff like that. And then we have our sight hounds as well, which have, hey, stop that. Jeez, they've got plenty of water downstairs, and they prefer the toilet water. I'll never understand that. Do you guys have that same issue? Let me know in the comments. So our sight hounds are usually very flexible because they're designed for chasing. They have very good eyesight, usually not the strongest sense of smell, and they're usually also characterized by having a deep chest because they chase. Whereas scent hounds are a little bit slower, they're just following the prey to where it is. And then actually, I haven't thought about this until now, but we also have our baying dogs, and I'm pretty sure baying dogs would fall under the hound category, because I can't think of them falling under any other category. Now, similar to hounds, we have our gun dogs, and our gun dogs are pointers and setters are pointers that are specialized for, hang on, I need to go take care of this, and then I will be right back. Alright, sorry about that interruption, everybody. Dogs just don't, some of them don't like to listen, like these ones right here. I told them to stay downstairs, and they chose not to. Hey, bed. That's right. Slink away. Oh my gosh. Trying to start a podcast or anything, and just everything tries to interrupt the recording. But I don't know, maybe it's a good thing. I'm starting to sound like a normal human being instead of speaking off of a script, so maybe that's ideal. I don't know. Where were we? So gun dogs. Pointers and setters are very similar to pointers, but they're specialized for hunting quail, grouse, and pheasants. Now, pointer is in the name. They point. They find prey, and when they find the prey, they take a very characteristic stance. They point their muzzle towards the prey, so the hunter and the owner knows that the prey is in that set of bushes or wherever the prey is, the grass or bushes, whatever. Then we have our retrievers, who are dogs that specialize in, and this is a modified hunting behavior, where humans are actually doing the hunting, and then retrievers are finding the corpse and bringing it back. Now it sounds kind of barbaric, but you take a slab of meat at the store, that's part of a corpse. It's really nothing that bad. Now, as part of the job, retrievers usually have what's called a soft bite. So your Labrador Retriever, for example, is a very common pet and therefore has an inflated bite statistic. However, they're not demonized nearly as much as some other breeds because when they bite, the bite force is much smaller because they're bred to have a smaller bite force so that they don't damage fowl when they're retrieving it for the owner. And then we have spaniels. Spaniels are used for flushing birds out. So I've never bird hunted before, but in theory, you could use a spaniel to flush the prey out, and then you shoot it, and then you have your retriever go and bring it back to you. And then finally, we have our water dogs. And water dogs are basically, they're believed to be a very primitive version of retrievers. They're very friendly in water. They're believed to be the founders for retrievers, which are usually also very water-friendly dogs, like Labradors, for example. And an example of a water dog would be a poodle. Poodles are very common. So just because something is a primitive or progenitor breed does not necessarily mean that it is rare. And then we have our pastoral dogs. And now these are not pastor dogs, they're pasture dogs. So pastoral is in reference to dogs that live on a pasture, which is with livestock. And we have our herding dogs and our livestock guardian dogs. Now, herding dogs, I'm sure many of you have watched videos or seen what they are. And they use a modified hunting behavior. Now, this modified hunting behavior is selectively bred so that it's the animal no longer has the instinct to attack or to kill, but its instinct to chase has been amplified more or less, and so it's just constantly chasing these animals all day long that it normally would consider prey, or that like a different dog breed or even a wolf or coyote might consider prey, but instead of killing, it's just nipping. And so it's a very interesting modified hunting behavior there. And then we have our livestock guardian dogs, which now livestock guardian dogs are not where most of these groups that I'm speaking of are more of an ancestral category. Livestock guardian dogs are not specifically their own ancestral group. They mostly come from other groups of dogs, and nope, I couldn't find any information on exactly where they come from, but there are a lot of articles that point to them coming from the mollisers, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And your livestock guardian dogs are usually large, and a lot of them, like the, I might say this wrong, I think it's the Abruzzese. It's an Italian livestock guardian dog. It looks like a mop dog. So if you Google mop dog, you'll see what I'm talking about. They are bred to have long, essentially dreadlocks of white fur that matches sheep, and so that they can camouflage into the sheep herd. So predators don't know that they're there, and then the predators will come along, and then especially with this dog that I just told you about, the mop dog, hey, bed. Damn it. They're worse than children. No, go to bed. I'm about to lock them up. Put them in the big dog house. So like this mop dog that I was telling you about, their fur can act like armor, or if you have other breeds like Kangles, they use their large size, and a lot of times they don't have a lot of stamina like your sled dogs might, but they will use their large size and short bursts of energy to kill predators like bears and wolves and anything that might threaten the livestock. And I couldn't verify it, but I found some reports of livestock guardian dogs luring coyotes and like not intimidating coyotes, so that coyotes will come in and get closer so that the livestock guardian dog can kill them more easily. Now, like I said, that's unverified, but it is what it is. And then we have our terriers. So your terriers are usually small breeds, and they are very wiry, usually have extremely high prey drive, and originally were used for their small size, prey drive, and agility were used for ratting and getting rid of small game and stuff like that. Now, there's a couple different ways to categorize terriers. One of the older methods for categorizing them is long-legged terriers and short-legged terriers. And then there's a more modern way of categorizing them between hunting-type terriers and short-legged terriers. And now we get to our bull and terriers. We're getting to the bulldogs in a little bit, but for now we'll just do bull and terriers. And so a bull and terrier breed is a breed. It can be bull terriers, it can be the American Pit Bull Terrier, it can be the American Staffordshire Terrier. There's a lot of different, the American Bully. There's a lot of modern breeds. A lot of them are now aimed at aesthetics, but they were originally bred for things like bull baiting, bear baiting, dog fighting, ratting, stuff like that. And so they're bred between bulldogs and terriers, and they're meant to combine the strength and tenacity of your bulldogs with your agility and your prey drive of your terriers. And so that's where a lot of this ancestry comes from for the bull and terrier dogs. Now, a lot of these dogs have had such a long ancestry, and there's so many different breeds of bull and terrier breeds that I decided to categorize them as their own specific class. And essentially they would function as their own ancestral group because they've been so specialized. Then we have our band dogs, and band dogs are similar to your bull and terrier breeds as far as purpose of breeding, but it's more of a miscellaneous class, and usually they involve combinations of mastiffs, bulldogs, and terriers, and they're a lot of your breed reinventions, a lot of your designer breeds are band dogs. They're bred for a working purpose, because your breeds like your Great Dane and Weimaraners and stuff like that used to be bred for hunting boar and doing actual work, but modernization has whittled away a lot of need for that, and so breeders have followed that function and no longer breed working stock, but rather show or just pet stock. And so some people who want to work dogs have a hard time getting a hold of working dogs, and so they'll take two different breeds that have something the person wants but is also lacking, and match that to a complementary dog and breed it together. So you now get this mixed dog, which is called a band dog, and it serves, or at least some of that litter may serve the function that the breeder wanted. So we have our sled dogs after that. Now, I can't really decide. It was hard to find a lot of hard and fast information prior to the 1800s on sled dogs. So I know that a couple are mixed breeds, like our livestock guardian dogs. Some were mixed between mastiffs and other breeds, but some sled dogs have very long history, and so I'm not sure if they fall into their own genetic category or if if they would fall under the primitive breeds. I was having trouble finding that research, and I'm a little short on time, so if you have noticed anything wrong with that, or if you want to point any sources out to me that would make it easier for me to correct that in the future, just let me know in the comments. Now we get to the mollusers, and these are my favorites. Let's save the best for last. There's a lot of history here. These are potentially the most specialized, while at the same time perhaps some of the most ancient breeds that we have access to. And the mollusers come from the ancient breed, the Molossus, and the Molossus was a large and unusual, for the time, an unusually large dog breed that was bred by the Molossians. And so I'm just gonna go over a little bit of, running out of battery power. I'm almost done. The Molossians, I'm going to go over a little bit of history here for you, just to give you some context. So, for example, in 385 BC, the Illyrians attacked the Molossians and attempted to basically put their own puppet government there. Ancient Sparta intervened and helped, and as we all know, ancient Sparta is known for its ability to wage war. The Illyrians had a huge advantage, but they still lost to the Molossians and the Spartans. And then in 360 BC, so a little bit later, about 15 years, the Molossians got attacked by the Illyrians again, and the king evacuated everybody except his combatants, and then he just let the Illyrians loot them, basically, and that encumbered the people and made them easier to attack. This is important here in a minute, so stick with me. I know this isn't a history podcast. So later on, the Molossians decided to go to war with ancient Rome, and they ended up losing, and Rome conquered and enslaved a lot of the Molossians. Now, why is this relevant? Well, the Molossus is actually an ancient Roman breed, and it's believed to come from the Molossians. And the Molossians are known for having large dogs prior to the Romans, so that's why this connects that way. And so when we look at how the Molossians won a lot of their conflicts prior to ancient Rome, we see that they're very clever people, and this cleverness applies to how they bred their animals. And this is true for all of ancient Greece, really. There's not a whole lot of writing on it, but the ancient Spartans were known for their eugenics programs, and as a result, the dogs that they bred, the Castorian Hound, which, like I said, there's not much written on that, was highly prized across the rest of ancient Greece. So we see that the way a state runs itself can have massive influences on the development of the native breeds in that area. So the Molossians bred these large war dogs, and then they got conquered. And so Rome ends up inheriting the Molossus as basically a spoil of war after beating the Molossians. And the Molossus then spreads throughout the Roman Empire, and with the fall of the Roman Empire, it begins to diverge into these different breeds. And so in northwestern Europe, we see the development of the bulldogs from the Molossus, and that's the ancient bulldogs were characterized as a very wide, very deep-chested, broad-headed, very squarish breed, and they're named for their use in bull baiting. And then elsewhere, the mastiffs, as we call them now, developed from the Molossus as well. It is believed that the most direct descendant of the Molossus is the Neapolitan Mastiff, which is an Italian Mastiff. Some breeds, like the Cane Corso and the Great Dane, are considered Mastiffs, but they're not, and I'll get into that next week, I think, because I want to cover something similar to this, but it's going to be still a separate topic. Some people, when they refer to a Mastiff, they're referring specifically to the English Mastiff. But, like I said, the Neapolitan Mastiff, the French Mastiff, there are a variety of other Mastiffs that are true Mastiffs and that are descended from the Molossus. So yeah, I think that's everything for today, guys. If you noticed anything wrong, if you think I didn't do enough research, or if you think I did too much, make sure you point it out in the comments. Let me know how you feel. Did you like it? Do you not like it? Do you want more energy, less energy? And then just discussion. Talk about everything you learned and everything you know, and tell some stories too. That being said, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And then see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.